Hi, everybody. Welcome to Technology Evangelist Podcast, brought to you by Medidenta Digital. I'm Dr. John Flucke, and today this is a great one for me because we're going to talk to Dr. Lori Trost, and Lori has been a friend of mine for, gosh, I don't know, a couple of decades at least, and she's doing a lot of digital stuff. She's an educator. She's a terrific clinician, and she's a really great gal. So I think you're going to love this. Lori, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, John. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. And I finally am thrilled we can talk. This is great.
You know, it's funny when you kind of live in the world that we live in, where you're a dentist, but you're also doing things on the business side of things. And we often run into each other at meetings, and I'm walking somewhere to meet with somebody, you're walking somewhere to meet with somebody, and we're like, hey, how are you doing? And we never get a chance to really catch up other than like the 5 minute how you doing thing. So I think this is going to be a great conversation. I want to start off, Lori, with kind of your origin story. How did you get into dentistry, and what led you down this path?
I love that question. And I honestly, I'm going to distill it down to one thing. I am very and have been very compelled my entire life since a kid. I had a female pediatrician, and she really had a very strong impact on me. She had just this great demeanor about her, and it always struck me as being, wow, I want to be like her. And she was always about just having this good, healthy awareness and promotion of self. And I just fell into dentistry because good at math and science, of course, right? But more importantly, following her path, I really wanted to be able to change smiles and make it better and just make generations be excited about coming to the dentist and getting rid of this, really get rid of all the stigmas, because there's so many that have followed us over a long time. And we live in such a fantastic time, married with technology, science. Material science is unreal right now. The care, the level that we can give, the patient experience that we can create for people. I had a young girl in my practice yesterday that it constantly reminds me of how important it is that we need to listen and hear what they've been through, and we can make a better difference for them and improve. And by the time we got done, she's ready to schedule. So we have an ability to really change so many lives, and just that's what I want my legacy always to be.
It's interesting that you say that because the reason that I went into dentistry was the the guy that my family went to when I was a kid. And this is back in the old days. It's funny because he wasn't very progressive. Um, he worked by himself. He had a lady that answered the phone, one operatory. He was a stand-up dentist. He worked by himself. He actually even had belt-driven handpieces. I think I was in high school before he ever picked up a true air-driven rotary. And the thing was, he was always so happy. I remember that he'd hum to himself or he'd whistle while he was talking, or I mean, whistle while he was working. It's kind of like the Seven Dwarfs. Only he was tall. But anyway, but he was just such a great guy. And he was good at what he did. I didn't figure out that there was even a needle involved until I was like 14 years old. He was so good at, keeping it out of my sight and doing things and it's incredible how people can do things like that. They don't even realize at the time that they're having this impact, and yet, they change people's lives. And I think that's just so amazing that a smart lady that was compassionate um, was kind of the key to getting you into this.
And ironically, my brother, who's a year younger than myself, went on to become a surgeon. So think about that. So she definitely had a play in our world, and it wasn't like we were going there all the time, but when we did, it was very powerful. Yeah.
That's cool. So I want to ask you now, Medidenta and I are working together on some projects this year. And I know that you are as well. So I've actually had Sean. The first interview I did was with Sean on the podcast, just to kind of explain why we're doing, this whole thing, and how we're going to go about it and stuff. But how did you meet Sean, and how did you get to be such a fan of the company?
Well, I'm fortunate to be able to really look at a lot of different products. I get samples sent to me. I get to try them out, and it's neat because to be able to be on the front end of that dinosaur. We talk about that a lot of times, right?
Yeah,
And to be able to just really assess a product and see how it works, how practical it is. Does it, and really to evaluate it in ways that clinically you can see how efficient it is, or how durable or how robust it is. What are the components, and what's the customer service like if you need to call, all those kind of things. So I happened across this company, and before you know it, we're doing these Profi Magic and their angles, and then the CRA comes out and puts this great marker on them. They're the best, and they were, and they still continue to be. And you talk about splatter and aerosol, all these kind of things that you got to be knowledgeable about and aware of. And so I'm at the Chicago Winter, and I find this company, I find Profi Magic, and there's Sean, who I didn't have an idea, but I had no idea he was really the front man, but yes, he was. And so I introduced myself, and well, lo and behold, we strike up this conversation, and that turns into a friendship and a relationship that's amazing. And I think what I've found is that Medidenta is such a great company in that they are knowledgeable. They have incredibly good products, very unheard of. And at the time, I was like, does anyone know about No, no. I'm like, you got to try this. And my hygienists were raving about this. At the time, I had 3 hygienists in my practice. They all loved these products. And Medidenta was very hygiene driven at that point, which they've expanded now since then, but years ago. But yeah, I mean, amazing company that you just uncover. And this is just a gem. And these great people that are behind it and are very thoughtful. They're very intentional in what they bring to the market. And they want it to work for you in your hands and your practice for your patients.
yeah, I think that's a great summation of it. Just the follow through, the care about this. One of the things that I thought was really cool when I started working with Sean is that he said, I got this great idea. How about we put sales last and education first? And if people want to learn about, a subject, or, something that we sell, or maybe something we don't sell, but if doctors are better informed, then they're going to make better decisions. And I'd rather sell 5 things that people love and take good care of than to sell 100 things that 95 people don't like, and then you get the reputation in the industry or whatever. So I think that's really cool. When we're doing some of the hands-on things that we're doing out in Las Vegas at their facility, you can show up and not even know anything about it, not want to buy anything, but you can try all these different gadgets and all this different stuff, and get a chance to see if it works for you. And that's pretty uncommon in the industry nowadays. Now they'll have, like users meetings or trainings or whatever, but it's after you've already made the investment. I love the fact that you can actually try something and see, does this work for me? Or, like you talked about the Profi angles, they sell, I'm not even sure how many, but they sell a lot of different models of disposable Profi angles. So, go to a course, try every one of them and see, what you think. I think that's genius. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is I don't do a lot of dentures. I do some, but I don't do very many. But I know that you are doing a bunch of them, and you love doing them, and you're having great success, and you're doing it digitally. So let's talk a little bit about that whole thing. And and really quickly, I should tell people too, you're in St. Louis, I'm in Kansas City. So we're kind of neighbors, except when the Cardinals and the Royals play each other. I'm actually
Absolutely.
I'm a closet Cardinals fan, just so you know, except when they're playing my Royals. But anyway, so tell me about your journey and kind of what you're doing with digital dentures.
Well, first off, I won't hold against you that you're a Royals fan.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
But and I wish our Cardinals were doing a little bit better, but they'll get there. So quickly. But I literally I'm a comprehensive restorative dentist and have been for a long time, really just and full mouth, just mouth and body. I just feel there's a very
Hmm.
strong connection there. And so literally, I had a very robust practice that I had in 2016 that I sold.
Yep.
And the practice was, in a nutshell, kind of running me. I was not running it anymore.
Yep.
And I wanted to make some decisions personally and professionally that would really help me get into a better space. So I did that. And with that said, kind of took a little bit of a sabbatical for about a year and a half. And then I really started missing the everyday patient care massively. We are fed by that. That satisfaction, that relationship that you build
Yep.
is incredible.
Hmm.
It's so strong. It has such a magnetism. So I ended up in 2019 opening a practice in a very, very small little town, 3,200 people.
Wow.
And yes, and literally this whole thing just drops in my lap. I get a scanner, Chicago Midwinter, February 2020. And we all know what happened shortly thereafter, March,
Yeah.
right? So
Yep.
March 13th on a Friday, that new scanners delivered to my practice. I'm starting from scratch, by the way, at this practice. Okay, just and then COVID hits.
Right.
Long story short, the following Monday on the 16th. First off, I put the scanner together. You know how we are. We don't even read instructions. We get so
Right.
excited about opening that box. It's like Christmas. It's like all of a sudden, put it together, your birthday, whatever. You just got to do it, right?
Right. Guilty.
Yes, yes, very guilty. And it ends up that I go and this patient walks in and we're just, starting to go, okay, what can we do here? And next thing you know, it's a denture, so it's broken in half. And I'm like, okay, Pauline, I'm freaking out a little bit because honestly, up to this point, I've really hated in my entire career doing dentures. And I don't know about you, but when I went through school, we were taught we were going to really dentures would go away.
Hmm.
They would be minimized. Our job was fluoride was going to work in the water. We wouldn't have caries anymore, and we would have healthy mouths, and we really didn't have to do a lot of restorations. That was kind of the thought, but that's not the case. So here's Pauline, and I am looking at myself. I'm a digital dentist. I don't have stone in my practice. I don't have plaster. I don't have any of that mixing bowl thing, whatever you want
Right.
to. You don't understand what I'm talking about.
Oh,
I have no
absolutely.
alginate. I have nothing. I've got impression material, but I got my scanner now, right?
Hmm.
So I quickly pivot and I call my lab thinking, okay, if they're even open, right?
Right.
Well, luckily they were. And I work with May Dental Arts out of Fenton, Missouri, phenomenal group of people and have had a great relationship with them. Chris May luckily answers the phone. He says to me, go ahead. He goes, how's the denture fit? I said, well, it's just a midline crack, basically. He goes, no problem. He goes, go ahead and glue it, super glue it. We all have Loctite, right? So I glue it
Right.
together. He goes, do a border mold wash impression. It probably needs, yeah. I said, yep, it's lacking retention, has a little bit of loose fit. That's probably why it cracked you in the occlusion. So, and the plastic material was old too. So that takes me down a path. And he said, he looks, and he says to me, I want you to get that scanner. Is it online? I'm like, oh yeah, I got it online. I did that Friday already. So he goes, no worries. He goes, scan the denture and send it to me. And I had no idea what I was doing. I'm going to tell you that right now. I just did it. I had no idea of technique. I think it took me 22 minutes to scan that impressioned denture. But I wasn't busy either, so that was nice.
Yeah. Yeah. No
I,
pressure. Seriously.
at that time, I didn't know there were any kind of settings. I didn't even understand any of that about the scanner. I didn't, and since that time, and in 5 years, boy, scanners have really just improved greatly on their abilities to capture a lot of things now, easier and better and much user friendly. But long story short, I sent it to him, and then 3 days later, I get back this beautifully packaged, carbon printed Lucitone denture. And I'm like, what's this about? I mean, I'm used to having the blue little blue container with the clear lid and the dentures in there, and you open it up
Right.
and they got the patient, all that. And so anyhow, I call Pauline back. She comes in, we put it in her mouth, and a week goes by, and 2 weeks go by, and I don't know about you, but I've always been married to a denture patient. You see them,
Uh-huh.
and then you repeat, and then you have 5 to 7 adjustments usually, and that's usually
Yes.
the average. And it's just I've always hated dentures for that exact reason. And so it goes on, a month goes by, and I'm thinking maybe I should call her. And guess what? At 6 week point, I call her And I'm like, Pauline, how are you doing? I've never called a denture patient. And I'm worried that maybe she was sick or something happened in a, you
Sure.
don't know, because you're expecting them to come back for an
Mhm.
adjustment. We're taught that. Well, this is absolutely the contrarian kind of situation and mindset because what I came to learn was Pauline says to me exactly, it fits incredible. She goes, this is the best fitting denture I've ever had. And she at that point in time had been wearing dentures for 37 years.
Oh, wow.
So I listened to that. And then literally 2 weeks after she came in, I had another patient that we went ahead and had a similar situation with the denture, remade it, incredible accuracy, incredible fit, no adjustments. And this kind of puts a marker in my brain thinking, what is going on here? So I start diving into literature. I've got time. I start looking at accuracy. I start looking at what's happening here. I start working with the lab to understand design. What do these files look like? I start to understand settings. I start diving in deeply. And in the next 6 months, I really have a crash course on the accuracy of what a scanner can provide for a digital denture. And I start honing a technique that now has reached a lot of people and a lot of patients to make it better.
So that is just incredible because, one of the things that I think is a big impediment to adopting something new, especially in healthcare, is that I like to use the analogy that it's like we're on stage. When you're with a patient, they're looking to you to make sure that you're confident, to make sure that, you seem to be competent, although sometimes they can't tell. But nobody wants to look like they're struggling when they're in that environment. You don't want to say, how do we turn this on? Because, then the patient thinks, oh my gosh, if they don't know how to turn it on, what kind of result am I going to get? And and yet some of this stuff is, and scanners are like that. They're so user friendly and easy to use that it's really difficult to make a mistake. You almost have to like try to make a mistake. And I think having that ability to do that and know it's going to work, as opposed to, because I'm sure you see this when you talk to people too, you get something new, you try it, you struggle a little bit the first time, the stress level goes way up because you're on stage and you want to look like you know what you're doing. And so the first time people hit a little hiccup, the human reaction, and it's not a bad thing, it's just how people are made, is we say, I'm going to do this the old way because I'm good at that. I'm competent at that. And so you bail out, you do it the old way. And then the next time you try and do the new thing again, the first little snag you hit, you're like, no, I'll just do it the old way. And then pretty soon that brand new gorgeous scanner isn't doing nearly what it could do because you've sort of boxed it off and said it doesn't work, or it doesn't work in my hands. And I think what you just told is a great story about just having the confidence in it and diving in and changing somebody's life in the process. I mean, that's like the cherry on the sundae.
It really was. And what happened was, ironically, one of those first few patients that I had come in referred a couple other friends to me that also were denture wearers. So within the first 6 months, I mean, and again, I did more dentures that first 6 months in my career than I probably did the last 10 years of my other practice. Okay. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I love to tell the story when I was in dental school. My third year, I partnered with my lab partner and we broke a denture apart. So I did the maxillary arch, he did the mandibular arch and set the teeth, right? Remember all those?
Oh yeah.
Back
Unfortunately, I do remember
the
it really
testing.
well.
Yeah, the PTSD, right,
Yeah.
get away. And then my fourth year, I did a full set myself, right? And so literally, I came out of dental school having 3 arches of dentures that I had created and delivered. Not a lot of experience.
Right. Yeah.
And then so you fast forward now and you get out the mindset where you're taking and replacing that analog. So no longer do we have a wax rim.
Mm,
You can actually use a current denture in whatever conditions it's in to literally become like a custom tray.
mm.
And and I'm a firm believer in this, you still have got to do a functional impression. You've got to be able to capture the tissue. You have moving tissue in there. There's no scanner that can replicate that. Okay, I'll be that.
Sure.
on that. I am definitely very, very adamant about you have to have a functional impression. And by the way, when you go to impress an upper or lower arch, that tissue compression very much mimics, when you're doing that impression, it very much mimics what that denture feel is going to be in the compression of the tissue, about 120 microns, okay? So I've come to learn that. I've also come to learn that you can take the analog, right? That wax rim. Okay,
Yep.
so let's move forward and do this, what we can now call the copy denture or the PMMA or a monolithic denture. And that's
Hmm.
where we can really start to make drastic changes if we need to. If we need to lengthen and size the edges, move the midline, undo the reverse cant maybe, super erupted teeth, we can take and carve those off with an acrylic burr easily chairside. There's so many options that you can literally, I mean, in wax, you never had anything that was ever permanently set and it would move on you and there was lack of accuracy, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you start to think about then what happened for me following that first 6 months. I started chronicling, and I like to do this, and I really advise young dentists to, and even you've been in a career for, maybe 10 or 15 years, start to track what you're seeing in your practice and look at trends,
Yep.
look at what you're
Hmm.
learning. Just write a few notes down because what you're going to see is you're going to be able to learn from that information. So for me, I started chronicling what kind of dentures were coming to me. Were they a copy denture? Were they something that I could literally simply copy and have it made in a second appointment deliver? Okay, simple. The next kind is a reference denture. We're going to start making changes. You're going to making changes maybe to the midline, the cant. Maybe there's super erupted teeth. Maybe the gingival zenith. Lots of different reasons.
Hmm.
Maybe you're opening the vertical. Maybe you need to really reestablish a better occlusion. And I never thought I talk about intercuspation and occlusion, but now we do that with dentures because we have, I mean, I learned monoplane teeth. I mean, it was ridiculous, right? They looked horrible. They looked like horse teeth. I hate to say
Yeah,
that. It's true.
it's true.
And now I've come to say that dentures can be one of the most aesthetic restorations you can put in someone's mouth. I mean, you can really make people look unbelievably better and improve their function. It improves their musculature, their chewing, their health improves because they can chew their food better. I mean, there's a lot of studies that show with monoplane teeth, especially how the chewing function and the musculature depletes over time.
Hmm.
And in 5 years, they've lost 90% function. I mean, that's a muscular tone. It's really drastic, along with bone and other things that go along with that too and ensue. But story straight, I learned about a copy denture straight up. Reference denture comes next with those changes that you're going to make, right? And I started diving into how do you reestablish vertical? Because many of the patients that were coming into me had horrible vertical dimension.
Yep.
The teeth were worn. Again, we're going back to materials, musculature, what they're trying to do, how they're trying to grab their feet, their food. Many of them were coming in as a class 3 because they're coming in and they're trying to literally snare their food and pull it and tear it. And that's often
Hmm.
what happens. So I started learning about that again, and I'm taking notes and I'm teaching myself from these cases what is happening. So I start looking at more cosmetic cases, restorative cases that we do, and I come across a gauge called a Conmetier gauge. And I
Okay.
start using that vertical dimension gauge to start looking at facial proportions to establish vertical. And I start really relying on that gauge, and it is spot on every time. I trust that gauge, and that's been something handy for me now for the last 5 years, and it has come in so incredibly valuable. So I use that. I mean, think about what we used to use, like tongue depressors, that bully. I mean, we have
Uh,
all kinds of gauges that you're using to measure this. It has speaking. I don't mean to really diss on that, but
right.
again, very not really completely repeatable or reliable, predictable
Yeah.
methods, right? So what I come over this whole story and I start to understand there's just repeated copy error through what we've been taught through the whole denture making process, right?
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
because of that, that's why the fits are not there. You look at how you did maybe an early alginate impression or a compound impression, and then you made that into a plaster, and then you made your custom tray off that. Again, you get a plus or minus on that. You get impressions that you're taking plus or minus, wax plus or minus. You look at all of that, then you're taking your final, you're trying again, what's moving, what's not, everything alters. And at the end, no wonder you have sore spots. No wonder you have a change in maybe what this is supposed to look like. Maybe that's why your midline changed. And I don't know about you, but there's been many a time chairside I'm sitting there trying to figure out and reestablish the midline. You're pulling off the
Yep.
front six. I mean, it's just tough. So I like something that's repeatable, predictable, and the digital flow just seemed to really work great in my hands. And I started just learning some quick, efficient tips. And from, again, my patient data, created basically the copy, the reference, and then the immediate dentures, which, I'm sad to say, but a lot of neglected dentitions started falling in play around 2022 and 23
Yep.
and has continued. It's starting to slow now, but immediate dentures really rose up in my practice. So I really honed a new technique on how to go about doing that. And then from there, then of course the dentures from scratch, which you still have a couple patients that come in with absolutely nothing. They just aggravated with what they were given. It doesn't work, and so kind of go from there.
One of the things that you said that really struck me is the whole thing of keeping a journal. Um, I it's I thought I was the only one that was nutty enough to do that. But when I was just starting out in practice, um, I had one chair, I had no patients, and I was kind of, like you said, you graduate with just enough knowledge sometimes to not be dangerous. And so I started keeping track. I like to write anyway. And I started to keep a clinical journal. And every day at the end of the day, I'd sit down with my notebook or even between patients if I had time, which in the early days I did. And I would write down what I did, what worked, what didn't work. And I would track these things throughout the whole process of whatever it was I was doing. And it was amazing to me doing that, how much I learned about not only what to do, but oftentimes what not to do. And I think it's an interesting thing too when you talked about the adjustments, because we went to dental school in the same era. I'm a little older than you are, but I remember being taught at Missouri, Kansas City, that after you deliver a denture, you see the patient 24 hours. And then after that, you wait 2 days, 48 hours more. And then after that 40-hour appointment, then you go to 72 hours and see him again. And I remember asking, I got in a lot of trouble in school because I really dig into that's how my mind works. It's like, well, why am I seeing them, at these different intervals? And what I was always told was just, well, because that's for the sore spots. And I kept thinking to myself, if all these things we're doing are so precise, and you're teaching me that this is the way you do it because it works, why am I having all these sore spots? Even, like a week later, I'm seeing the patient because now we've got to get those extra sore spots or whatever it is. And then the other thing that you said, which I think is so true, is that every time you do something, every piece of a procedure, the more pieces you have, the more room for error you have. If you're off, a tenth of a millimeter on one thing, and then the next step, you get off a tenth of a millimeter somewhere else. After 5 steps, you're off a half millimeter. And in the world we live in, a half millimeter is a huge distance. And it's just one of those things where we don't really think about it because the old thing of why are we doing it this way? Well, because that's how we've always done it. But if you look at things from a different angle, sometimes that's not really the case. So do me a favor here. Just let's say somebody walks into your office today, completely edentulous. They have a denture, but either it's worn or they're not happy with it or whatever. Kind of walk me through on just and I don't want to say easy because no denture is ever easy, but walk me through like a garden variety person that walks in and they're like, Dr. Lori, I've had this denture for 20 years and I'm just not happy with it anymore. Can you help me?
Yeah, exactly. So I like to go ahead. I love to do patient photographs, first of
Okay.
all. I think that's really critical. That's something that I need to share with everyone as well as you. When I'm taking on these cases, it's very critical to understand all the information that you need to send to the lab. And I
Yep.
offer like day-long courses to show this information. Okay. Very important.
Terrific.
And And why is this? The lab needs to see the face. They need to see at least a smile, a repose, and a profile.
Hmm.
Simple. Okay. Easy to do. We've got lots of templates. We can do that. Labs have that availability.
Hmm.
You can send that right to them. It's good, but they need to see that. That's number one. Number two, I'll start to establish their vertical. I take a lot of video right now too,
Hmm.
which is really fabulous. That's so powerful. And I see their speaking. I listen. I want to hear different. I have a little card that they can read off of to hear all of the different sounds, the S's, the THs, the F's, the L's, the M's, the P's, all of that. And
And you do that routinely. I mean, you don't
routinely.
just, you've got all these things, so it's a repeatable process, which I love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, it's like a checklist that I've been able to
Hmm.
develop, and that's what I share, right? So once I've determined it's a reference denture, which is it's going to be something that I'm going to use basically and craft and make changes to have a permanent denture made. So I can use their denture as a basically custom trace. So I'm going to go ahead and scan their denture. I'm going to scan their tissues. I'm going to scan their existing bite. I'll send that data to the lab, and then the lab will come back to me. And I like to have a monolithic or a PMMA denture made. Okay, that way I can start to make the changes on that. I'm not going to make the changes on their existing denture. From there, then I'm going to start to measure vertical, and I'm going to start to really hone in on that. The way I raise open the vertical, we all have composite. It's very simple and easy. Or if I need to lengthen incisal edges, if I need to move the midline, I'll put a glob of composite on there and I'll take a 557 and I'll slice right down the midline, right there in their mouth. I know it's exact and it's precise. So I can send that data and I'll follow that up with a very fine, thin Sharpie marker. So when I go to scan it to send it back to the lab for that record, they have no doubt where it's at. I'll go ahead and take when I'm doing vertical, I always use composite. It's easy for us. We can light cure it. I'll get that. And then what I do is I do a kind of a neat technique where I've learned it's kind of taking off of oral sleep appliances, but I'll take the bite registration completely as a horseshoe, rigid
Okay.
material, sets in a minute. I have them closed. I've got bilateral stops and an anterior stop and how I'm going to now modify their occlusion. Okay.
Yep.
Then what I will do is I will break the bite registration in half. I will place it on one side. I will scan the opposing and vice versa, place it here and scan. So now the lab, and you'll see all of my models look like as if they have an open space in them. But that's a beautiful thing because in the lab designer, when she goes and he goes to make that design, they can move that teeth right into position and no quandary whatsoever. We get
Beautiful.
really fabulous, quick, and easy, and they like that technique because they can just they in 5 minutes they can have the denture design done that quick. It's crazy good. So from there, then they'll send me sometimes if there's a question, if it's a really challenging case. I mean, that's a really extreme case what I'm talking
Mhm.
about where we're
Right.
making moving like that sometimes. But a lot of the cases I get, I mean, I have a 2 millimeter opening that's really nuts. 2 millimeters can make a huge difference in someone
Oh,
in class, especially a class three that goes into a class one, you name it all. But so long story short, from there, then if I like the design, a lot of times they'll send me the final. It looks great. I like everything, how we're achieving all of our goals. And I talk to the patient, I've understood what they wanted. That comes back to me then in 3 days, bottom line. And then I can literally have that denture delivered to them, usually within a week and a half to 2 weeks max with that kind of timeline.
and I think the other kind of cool thing about this is that I think people need to know is that you are doing this all digitally, yet you aren't uh, printing these in your office, right? You're still partnering with the lab.
Yeah, I do that. And honestly, I do that because I joke all the time. I don't mill my restorations either. I joke that I'm not a tax
Yep.
person. I don't do my taxes. I send that to the CPA. The same thing with my lab. I want the lab. They're good at that and they can do that
Yeah.
quicker. Do I know how to use ExoCAD? Yes. Have I messed around with it? Yes. And play around with it? Yes. Do I have the time for that? No. That's not necessarily my joy. My joy is delivering, and I've got so many people that I want to be able to take care of and do that, send that off to have somebody who just can make that easy and simple and go from there. But I do challenge a lot. I mean, I think the whole trend of what's going to happen in dentistry is where we're going to have more printing in office. We have some wonderful products that are coming out right now that allow printing and just the whole process to be simplified. And I really look forward to that happening. And that's going to grow in strength and in numbers here in the next few years greatly.
And I'm glad that that you're talking about not doing it yourself because I do think in some ways that kind of frightens people. If you're a dentist that's been practicing for a while and you've got your techniques or your systems and you decide, okay, I want to do, like I want to get a scanner and I want to do digital dentures. I think a lot of people, when you say digital dentures, for some reason, a lot of people think of, oh, I've got to have a printer. So now not only do I have to learn about the scanner, how to do the procedure that way, but then I've got to learn how to print. I put all of that burden on either my staff or my team or whoever is in there. Um, and the one thing that I've always loved about dentistry is that I have options. I love having options, and I don't think the the whole introduction of these digital things and digital design is going to, because I've had people say, well, what's going to happen to the lab industry? And I don't think the lab industry is ever going to go away. It might contract a little bit. Maybe there won't be as much demand, but you're always going to have people that have good eyes for what they do. They understand it. Side story, but I thought this was really interesting. I think it was either this year or last year, Coca-Cola for Christmas decided to do a completely AI generated Christmas commercial for Coke. So everything was CGI, including the people. And what they found was they got incredibly negative feedback from customers who said, I watched that, it was creepy. The people didn't look right. Their eyes looked weird, or whatever. Their skin tone was really odd. Their face doesn't move right when they speak. And I don't think a machine is ever going to be able to replicate what an artist sees, and lab technicians are artists, I think, first and foremost. And the ability to process what we have and then put your soul into that. I don't think you can ever get rid of that. You may not need as many because maybe somebody doesn't need the soul on an upper second molar crown, but you still have to have the people involved because you're going to have situations where you need that. Plus, there's people like you that don't want to do it. I don't want to be a lab tech. I never poured my own, models and ditched my own dyes and casted my own, gold crowns or whatever. I know I've got good people as a backstop and I let those people do that. So I love the fact that you brought that up because that's one of the things I want people to understand about this is all this does is give you more options. It makes it easier. It gives you better results, but you don't have to shoehorn yourself into some, complete different realm that you've never been in. You can either, use it to be better, or you can use it as a stepping stone to do it all, but you don't have to. And I think that's terrific.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. Options are critical. I'm going to expand on an option too.
Yeah.
Even though, let's say that, so remember when the first milling machines came out and we were always curious about that, right? And we
Hmm.
even scanners. So, but labs have been using digital desktop scanners for a very long time. And many of us who've taken traditional style analog impressions have not realized when that goes to the lab, they're using a digital desktop scanner, right?
Right. Yeah.
Start that process. So I want to speak to, there are many dentists who say, hey, I don't have a scanner. Well, guess what? You don't need a scanner. What you can do is you can, again, have an option to
Hmm.
use the analog and digital. So what you can do is you can go ahead, start with your denture. You can take an impression. Yeah, but it's going to have to be sent off. It can go to the lab. They can scan it. You can get it back, right? But then you can start the whole process of a digital making process for that new denture via that method. So you don't have to necessarily have a scanner to go down that path. You can do it a different way. It might take a little bit longer in the timeline. That's all
Right.
it does. It lengthens it, but you still again have an option.
It's a lot like milling crowns. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of the crowns, whether you do it with a scanner or whether you send an analog impression, a lot of labs are milling the crowns. And I've had doctors tell me that, oh, only a human can, build the right contours or whatever like that, or, I want a human to touch it. But they don't realize that a lot of these, like you said, once they leave your office, it's digitally being scanned and created that way anyway. It's just, it's just more efficient for them. And if labs weren't getting good results from doing things digitally, I mean, dentists, we're a picky bunch, and rightfully so. We should be. Um, but if you try a new technique on something as a lab and you don't get good results, doctors are going to pick up whatever it is you send them and go, nope, that's not right. I need you to do that over. And, the doctor doesn't want to have to do that, but the lab sure doesn't want to have to do that. And, because that's not happening a lot, I think that kind of speaks volumes about this whole thing in general. Um, you mentioned exocad. So I like the fact that you brought that up because you can actually show people how they're going to look before you touch them with digital design software. Can you kind of cover that a little bit for me?
Yeah, so I think there's again, software programs are they're just so much easier, and the way that we can superimpose smiles onto faces now and really show the proper facial dimensions and proportions, height, speaking, chewing, affects airway.
Hmm.
I can go on and on about all these, but all of these programs now are really creating, and I think the ability for us to even just simply use our phones, which
Yeah,
we know how to do, right? So it's like,
right.
again, think about the user friendliness this is inserting in this whole process. So I'm excited about that. I think all of these all of these programs that are out there right now, I know two or three right now that are leaders, but I can tell you exocad, I believe, is one of the best that's going across the platform completely. Its ease of use and how many labs are using that's their number one platform they're using.
Hmm.
They like the scans that come in on that. They move it into that system, at least that I work with and I know that I talk and speak to. But there's good programs out there. But for us as a dentist to be able to superimpose, to be able to show that, to have a good concept of where we can start with. And again, we always need to talk about begin with the end in mind. It really
Right.
helps us to navigate backwards into a really good place and to thoroughly think through the steps to achieve that result.
Well, and I'm sure some people that are listening are going to say, well, you can do that with wax, and you can. But I think what's amazing to me is the ability to put a before picture on the patient monitor and then put an after picture on the patient monitor and basically tell them this is the result. Yes, you can do it on a before and after, stone model, but I don't think it has the same impact. It probably would to us or people in dentistry because we're really good at visualizing and knowing how that's going to work. But I think the patients having that nuance of seeing it in their face. I talk to patients a lot about the fact that oftentimes dentists will see somebody on TV or in a movie or whatever, and will be like, at midline's off, or the laterals are canted a little bit labially, or whatever it is. And we see that, but patients, what they see is they look at somebody and their brain just goes, there's something not quite right. I can't tell you what it is. I just know their smile looks off or their teeth look crooked or whatever. Or like the Coca-Cola commercial where the people don't look real. I mean, that's a big, um, you know, big nebulous term, but our eyes pick up on things. We notice subtleties, even if we don't know what it is. Our brain goes, wait a minute. Um, and so when you can take and say, this is what you're going to look like before you even touch them, so that they understand the end result. Because we've all done things, I think mainly about like doing cosmetic dentistry, like veneers or three-quarter crowns or whatever it is. We've all done things where we finish the case and the patient looks in the mirror and then they're like, can you round that just a little? And this feels like it's out just maybe a little tiny bit. Can you smooth that back? And we end up doing that. But I think if you and this is what I think is the cool stuff about digital, is you've got a case like that and you've got somebody that's very aesthetically conscious. You can print the interims, you can print the temporaries with incredible materials that can stay on there for a long time. And then when the patient says, can you round this, or can you smooth this a little bit, or bring this back, can do that right there in the mouth like we would do on the final, only you can do it before it's final. And then when the patient has worn it for 6 weeks or whatever it is, and they're completely comfortable that, yes, I really like this, I'm really happy, then you scan that and say, this is what the final's going to look like. And then all they have to do is get used to the feel of maybe a different material, but there's no change in anything other than the fact that now it's lithium disilicate, or now it's zirconia, or whatever it is. And I think that's just so much easier, because I have in my career, not very many, thank God, but I've actually had to cut some cases off and start over. And it was simply because I didn't spend enough time meeting the expectations before I started. And I think being able to set those expectations so that they know this is what it's going to be like, I think it just makes it so much easier, so much less stressful on anyone to do it that way.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think the predictability you have, and you said the word expectation, and that's exactly what it is. Sometimes we have maybe a different vision than what the patient does, so we're able to
Mm-hmm.
kind of meet in the middle, right, and make that right.
Yeah.
Super critical to, I think, to really deliver on those points, and simpler. It cuts down the chaos for us for sure. One of the things I've learned with the dentures, I'm going to drop back on this for a second.
Yeah, please.
Often when I have a case that I am doing dramatic changes, okay, and I can think of three right now off the bat, I literally will have the lab make like, once I know I've made the changes off their slash custom tray, I've taken the
Mm-hmm.
border mold and wash impression, okay, all that. I'll have the lab take an extra step where I want to make certain that I know the patient's going to be happy with this. So you
Mm-hmm.
talk about what can be printed now, what can be a trial run, for lack of a better term, trial
Yeah,
viewing,
absolutely.
trial smiling, trial function, speaking, all of that, aesthetics. So I'll have the lab, and it costs hardly anything to do. They have 5 shades right now. They can use these monolithic materials, and they really have almost the strength material possession that what the final materials do. So I'm really confident saying, hey, go home, take this, chew with it, speak with it, go with it. I mean, their gums are going to be white, right? You can even
Right.
use those if you wanted to. Okay, if you really have a high-end picky patient, go for it. But that's just a certainty that then you can deliver, and you can really evaluate their occlusion if you're making a lot of occlusal change. I had a patient recently that they had everything right, but then they had a funky crossbite, in the lower left. I was like, that
Mm-hmm.
we can make that better. So I wanted her cheeks to get used to that, because she talked about, this doesn't feel natural to me. So let's make it
Right.
natural. So I was able to do that. I give them a trial run. I'll let them go for usually 2 weeks, and then they
Mm-hmm.
come back to me. We, modify that again if we need to, evaluate that, and then move to the final. So it's a really good test run for that. And again, developing that certainty on the expectations that we want to have.
In the old days, I used to, on some patients where I had somebody that I really wanted to make sure it was right. Um, I had a material, I don't think they make it anymore, but Kerr made it. It was called functional tissue toner. And it was kind of like a reline material, only it never totally set. It would flow under pressure and give you a functional impression. So what I would do is I would actually line the wax try-in with that. And then I would sit down with the patient and I would give them a big speech about, this is wax. You can't drink with it. You can't eat with it. You got to favor it, but wear it for a couple of days and make sure that you like how it feels. Which was fine, except it was wax. And frequently they broke, or they'd forget and they'd chomp on something and the teeth would, shift all over the place. So this is like the best way to do that, because it is, like you said, pretty much final. It's not aesthetic, so you need them to come back and actually get the final aesthetic, but it lets you give them time to get used to things when you change them, because it's not permanent. And I love that, Lori. I think that is such a great idea to
It's a
do
great
that.
it's a great step. And here's the other caveat. And the majority of time, I'd say probably 85 to 90% of the time, we're good to go with what
Yeah.
we've done with the changes. So the other nice thing about this is then that can also act as a backup denture for the patient.
Mm, I love it. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So so that's just a nice caveat too. So it's a really, I think it's very methodical, very intentional. And I do want to point out too, I mean, this is something that you have to dive in again. Pay attention, listen to your patients, work with a good lab. I mean, that's really important. The other thing that's
Yes.
really neat, I find right now in denture materials, you've got the choice. Obviously, the lab can do it, design and print or mill. You've got
Right.
also now the options. There's great materials that are emerging now that are chairside or in the office that we can print. Roden has a
Hmm.
really amazing material that they're using. They have an incredible liner that they're using. Their soft reline materials, permasoft is unreal. I really
I
love it.
was going to ask you about that. So just run with that for a minute, if you would, because I
Yes.
actually wanted to make sure I covered that because I know you like it.
Yes. So I on my immediate dentures. So now that we've explored that monolithic try-in that we can
Hmm.
make with a patient, I actually use that material now. I have it characterized for immediate dentures, and I use that as a healing denture. Okay.
Yep.
And then what I do, because I know my accuracy is so high on my immediate dentures because of the digital design. Okay, I'm confident in that. We were taught again, what, have them back in 24 hours and see what
Yep.
happens. I do not do that now. I go and I see my patient 48 hours after. I then place a co-soft liner that is a tissue conditioner
Hmm.
that stays in there for probably about 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how many teeth are extracted and how much healing is required. And then I follow that up with that permasoft liner, and it's fabulous. It's so wonderful. And that rides out then in that PMMA, that trial
Yeah.
denture, right? That healing denture. And I'll let that go. That can stay. And you have to wait at least a good 3 to 4 weeks before you can at least place that in there against the material because you don't want to get into extraction sites, impede any healing. I'll let that run out for another 3, sometimes 4 months in that denture. And then I go process forward and I start my final then wash impression, border mold, and then I make my final immediate denture that is the final denture after that healing step.
That's beautiful. That's really genius because anybody that does immediate dentures at all knows, you mentioned, I think you mentioned earlier, you said something about being married to denture patients, and that is true. But I think especially with immediates, because as they heal and everything changes and remodels, and then all of a sudden you just don't have the retention you used to have, being able to offer people something like that helps them heal, um, aids with retention, and lasts is I mean that's a great way to do that.
Yeah, so I want to share a couple of my thoughts on that because that's really the trend of where I think things are. Immediate dentures right now, it used to be extremely barbaric. I hated
Hmm.
it for so many reasons. I think we all did. I mean, you took out the final remaining
Yeah.
teeth, you sent the patient out. Hey, I'll see you in 24 hours. They come back to you. They either got the dentures in their hand. They're miserable. They look and they
Right.
have been. They've been up all night usually. If the dentures are in, they can't get them out because they're so swollen, right?
Right. Yeah.
So let's look at that process. So in the past, we would take that stone model or the lab would, and they would just cut off where the teeth were. Well, compare that now to the digital process where they can literally take that model and predictably gauge how much resorption is going to happen immediately
Hmm.
once those teeth are gone. It's a process, and I can find and tell you with confidence it's very accurate. And all of these design programs have that built into them. So it's a really great way. So that in itself is a one reason why you want to do a digital immediate denture because the accuracy will lessen your appointments. It's going to make a better event for that patient, a better experience. Following up with that, after my first two immediate dentures, I started diving into more of how can I make this a better process for these patients are coming in, they're very unhealthy. They have a load
Hmm.
of medications they're taking.
Right.
So I started going down a rabbit hole of how can I make and set the stage for these patients who are going to endure extractions and have bone healing. What can I do? What can I make that stage look like that's going to be better for them? So now I've created like a nutritional protocol that I have for patients that undergo this process. And I can tell you they do not take pain medication through this whole process. They are healthy. They heal better. They look better. I mean, my the pictures that I have that I take of their mouths and their skin and their face is phenomenal. And I think if you start to look at if you can raise up your vitamin C, if you can get a probiotic in there, prebiotic in there, there's some good choices. I like the BioGaia line personally. But I have a whole protocol that I do that I have patients follow immediately when we decide we're going to be extracting teeth. Usually that's about 4 months out from where we finally go to when we do the final or the initial extractions and then go
Hmm.
to the final extractions. And the whole process usually takes around 6, maybe 7 months, sometimes just depends on case and how many teeth. But
Sure.
I have found that diving into this and making this a better process for them and teaching them what to do because they come in their perio, right? I mean,
Right.
they're caries. I mean, their mouths are really an environment that's not made to heal. So if you can change that and improve that, you've got a better result.
I think once again, the whole thing, I remember when I was in school, there was a lady that worked at the school in the AV department, and she was kind of a cartoonist as well. And she had this really funny picture that she'd drawn, and it had a lady laying in a dental chair with this huge mouth, a small head, and then a little tiny stick body. And it said how dentists view the world. And then next to it, there was a person sitting on a medical exam table, and the doctor was, using a tongue depressor and looking down their throat. And the mouth was just like a little tiny dot, and the head was real small, and then the body was just gargantuan. It said how physicians see the world. And I've never forgotten that because it's such a graphic representation of the truth of the body is connected to the mouth and the mouth is connected to the body. And I mean, we're learning more and more about it all the time, but we can learn and do even more. Everything is connected. Everything that you put into your body ends up somehow in your mouth. And everything that you put into your mouth somehow ends up into the body. And that connection and being able to teach patients about that and help them towards more not just optimal oral health but optimum physical health is that's such a great service to people. I'll bet most of your patients are like, what, I've never heard of this before. And
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I think the best thing, along with and again, I'm continually ratcheting up this protocol.
sure.
It starts, this change and this push. It starts with us really paying attention, like you say, the mind and the body and the health
Hmm.
and the gut, and looking at what's all as a full picture because we know about chewing but the best thing I think I see that digital dentures has brought and how it's transforming even in 5 years. I'm going to go 5 years because that's where I've been doing this now.
Sure.
But we've always been taught to have patients take their dentures out at nighttime,
Hmm.
correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, change your mindset. If you're doing a digital now materials are coming out. They're biocompatible. They're healthy. They're
Hmm.
antimicrobial.
Right.
That is only going to improve. So I tell all of my patients, keep your teeth in. The second reason that we were told, okay, to have dentures out was because chronic irritation. Chronic irritation, we know for a fact, is precancerous. We know that.
Right.
We know it. There's precision papers out that support
Hmm.
all of that. So that was the other reason we were worried about it. So we were having tissue coverage with improper material, chronic irritation. It really sets a very drastic stage for not a good event to happen. So with the merging now of good materials, a great accurate fit so you don't have any irritation, right?
Hmm.
Sore spots.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
you've got patients who have joints that work better, their mastication improves, their speaking improves, their confidence, their airways improve. Can I keep going?
Yeah.
The list goes on because you're really restoring a whole full person with just doing this process.
Well, and what I think is interesting about that is I've actually met a couple of people in my life who, both of them were ladies. Their husband had never seen them without their
Yes.
dentures in, ever. And both of them had been, I want to say 30 or 40 years in dentures. And they were like, no, I do not, I'm not, I'm not proud of it. It's embarrassing to me. I don't look my best. And I just don't want to do that. And I think it's so easy for us, when you've got a full complement of teeth that work just fine, it's easy to say, oh, you should, you've got to take those out. You've got to let the tissue rest or whatever. But it's a completely different circumstance when it's you. It's everything's always about me, Lori. So I got to bring me into the story. So I had number 14 extracted last summer, and it had crowns and all kinds of things, and it wasn't worth going through the trouble of trying to save it. So I had it extracted. I had an implant done. But being a dentist, um, I couldn't find all the time to everything done. So it took a lot longer than it should have. It took me a year to get number 14 back. But I tell patients a lot, so, I can sit here and spout to you that, oh, 80% of your chewing efficiency comes from your first molars and your second premolars. So that's a great number, but you know what? It never really made like complete sense to me until I was missing a first molar. And
True.
suddenly, I'm chewing everything on the right side. And then my TMJ starts getting, out of whack because I'm putting all the pressure over here and all those things that we can tell patients about. But when you go through it, it's a completely different aspect. um, I know a surgeon, and I think this is a great thing. He tells patients, he says, I can tell you the statistical incidence of like, paresthesia from third molar extractions, but really it doesn't matter because if it happens to you, it's 100%. And you don't
Right.
care about the other,
Exactly right.
percentage point. Yeah. And so I think what you're doing is putting yourself in their place and understanding the whole thing of the health and the understanding the thing of the social aspects of it, of giving people, confidence and all that. I love it. I really do.
It's been an incredible eye-opening again and learning. I mean, we're constant learners, right?
Yeah.
And students, and it's been probably one of the most satisfying things I've ever done in my career, hands down.
Well, and you're such an inspiration because, you're not a prosthodontist, you're a general dentist. You're a general dentist that stepped away for like 12 to 18 months, realized how much you missed it. It's your passion. You came back to it and you completely changed how you're doing everything. And yet, within 5 years, you have now taken something to a level that most people, you know, struggle probably to even comprehend at this point. And I think that's so amazing because, you don't have the advanced training of a prosthodontist. And it's not like, oh, well, I started scanning in 1995 or what, you jumped into this, and yet you have such a great story of how you've done this that I'm excited for people to see this episode or hear this episode because they can they can see and go, okay, somebody did that. Somebody made these changes, um, and they figured it out, and they figured it out in a short amount of time. I mean, I think this is just so incredibly cool.
It is exciting. I look at like the last 5 years in particular, and I think to myself, the changes that I've seen in the digital workflow, and
Hmm.
it's only getting better and it's getting easier and a lot more efficient. And if you or I can help champion that cause to help other dentists go, look, I tell people I was just like you,
Yeah.
I'm just like you. I'm not in a big high-rise scrapers, skyscraper someplace
Mhm.
doing, I'm not like that. I'm a wet-fingered dentist in the Midwest. And yeah, do I have people come from all over to see me? Yes, because I don't advertise. It's word of mouth that those are the
Mhm.
patients that come to me. They want to have the care level of a great experience with top shelf materials, good process, good methods, good predictability, good longevity. That's what we're about. So I'm like anyone else, and it's just how you dive in, what's given to you in the front, and you start to look at it, put the pieces of the puzzle together, and look what happens.
That's awesome. Hey, I want to ask you, I know that you were talking to Sean about doing a course at Medidenta. Do you have one on the books for them yet?
Yes, I think it's
Okay,
going to be in, I think the second weekend in October, I
okay,
believe. Yes.
great.
Yeah.
Uh,
And yeah, I'm very excited about
okay,
that because what it's going to do, it will be a course that will help walk you through the denture case presentation so you can learn to silo quickly. And then from that, the information that you need to gather for a digital successful case for the lab, or if you're going to do this printed in your own office and practice. It's going to help you learn about working with a scanner and how to really get the angles and the tough areas and understand better how to work with that scanner. And a lot of this too, and I haven't mentioned to this point, is very delegatable. I mean, my
yep,
assistants do a majority of the scanning. It's really and we kind of have challenges amongst each other. Who can scan better than the other or the faster,
yeah,
right?
yep.
But a lot of tips and tricks. I'll share a lot of cases. You'll walk through probably at least 20 cases with me that day. I'll show you what you need to look for, give you a heads up on, so you have great identification of that process, so that when you return to your practice, you're really going to be a lot more confident in what you can do to tackle these cases and have success.
I will make sure that we put a link to that in the show notes so that people can just click and go and register because I know that this is good. Like you said, it's not pie in the sky. My patients come into me on their Lear jets and then they leave and go, to their private island in the Caribbean. You're a dentist like me. You're in the trenches, you're working, and I know it's going to be great info. Um, Lori, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy life to come and educate me and educate everybody else on how you're doing things and how you're changing the world. I just think it's the coolest thing ever. I'm so proud of our friendship and I'm really proud of what you're doing.
Well, thank you. This has been an honor to talk with you, and I've just loved every bit of it. And I look forward to working with you more and with Medidenta and that course. And I wish you all the best. Yeah, great to spend time with you.
Thank you. So that's it, folks. We're done for another one. I know you got a boatload of stuff out of this. Um, Having new episodes coming out all the time. Be sure to check back. I'm Dr. John Flucke. Thanks for watching the Technology Evangelist Podcast. God bless. Done. Look at that. That was incredible.
That was
That was
easy.
so good.
That was easy.
Good. Well, I'm glad it was. I didn't want it to be stressful, but
Oh
I knew,
gosh.
like I said, I know that you and I know each other well enough that it wasn't going to be a big deal. But wow, that was you just took that and ran with it. Nice work.
Oh, well, no, good for you too. I think the message, and you know this as well. You got to meet people where they're at in their journey of
Yes.
learning and their practice, right? In their
Yep.
professional career. And so I think there's something in there for everyone, no matter what level they're at. And
Hmm.
I think that's the takeaway. And they can jump in and whatever, where the elevator floor is
Yeah.
and go. And that's really the takeaway from that. So,
I just love the fact because, people, I think sometimes, you know, eh, you don't, some people don't like to change, and dentists are kind of famous for that. And I love the fact that, like I said, you're not a prosthodontist. You're not some person that's doing research, or whatever. You're in a little town in Missouri, and in a short amount of time, you've learned all of this info and just changed things up so much. I really think this is going to be inspiring to other doctors that think, okay, she's kind of just like me. If Lori could figure this out, I think I could figure it out too. And I know with your guidance they will. I think this is just really, it's really cool. I'm so happy for you.
yeah, thanks. It's a crazy story. And honestly, so let me tell you where this has taken me now.
Yeah.
So, in 2022, I spoke at the ExoCAD meeting in Spain,
Okay. Yeah.
shared, so I was the first woman to ever be on the main stage at an ExoCAD meeting.
Get Ow, congratulations for
Yeah,
that.
that was pretty big. That was pretty
That's
big.
huge.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, but
And
it's
then
good, good crazy.
yeah, and then also I can tell you that I consult to a few companies now that are making healthier materials,
Hmm.
and what's going to come on the market is so much better. And I'm excited to be part of that because that's a big deal.
You
It-
know, when you were talking about the materials and not taking the dentures out, I was thinking of the Nobio company. They came out, they've got that molecule, that
yes,
basically
yes.
it lances bacteria for any other reason. I didn't want to bring it up because I don't know where they are with. I know they're trying to sell the quaternary ammonium thing now as kind of a standalone to companies. But can you imagine putting that in a denture and having something that just kills, you know, everything that's unhealthy under that? I mean, how amazing is that? That, like you said, people don't have to take them out anymore. I mean, it's just so cool.
Right. And I think I think we are very much on the cusp of having incredible healthy products to put in the mouth. It's a very underserved population. I've learned that,
Yeah.
and they deserve more and better. And they carry a lot of baggage because of what's happened to them. Like
Hmm.
you talked about those two women, it's
Yeah.
and yeah, I'm just really excited. Oh my gosh, it's crazy. So yeah, I'm pumped about that. It's really neat. Yeah,
That,
it's
yeah.
coming. It's coming.
And
Glidewell's got their antimicrobial denture material out.
I didn't know it was on the market now.
Mhm.
Okay,
It is.
cool.
It is.
Cool,
Yes,
cool,
they were the
cool.
first to come on. There's going to be two more that are going to be coming on soon.
That is, I don't do a lot of stuff with Glidewell, but that is such a great company. Jim, eh, I don't know, he's kind of like Steve Jobs. He sort of
Oh, he
sees the
is.
future, and then kind of leads the way into it. And, the whole thing with, coming up with mills and, people are like, well, he's crazy. He's going to put the labs out of business. And I was like, no, he sees the way the industry's going. He wants to be a part of that. It's just,
Have you
it's,
read his book, Constant Change?
no, I have
You
not.
need to read it. You know
Okay.
what? Yeah, it's really fabulous.
I'm writing it down right
Yeah.
now because that's like my credo anyway. So thank you.
It's very good. And I have to give kudos to Stephanie for taking the baton and doing what she's
Yeah.
doing right now. And I don't work with them either a lot, but I do know a lot of, I'm on their radar. They're on my radar.
Hmm.
And I applaud them for really, I tell you, they've stepped out with education. They are a leader. And I have to go back to what Sean and you have said. Education is the path. And if you can
Yeah.
do that and you put that in someone, they have now the ability to really purchase what they want to and to work with what they can see and
Yeah.
it's in their hands. I look at all the companies right now that have really moved away from, they've had corporate takeovers where
Hmm.
education they believe doesn't really have any value. And
Right.
oh my gosh, it's frustrating beyond belief because you see their numbers and they wonder why they're dropping off. Well, it's because they're not putting education first. So to me, it's a forefront.
My dad, so my dad wasn't in healthcare. He was a corpsman in the Navy for a couple of years, but he wasn't a dentist. And in the 90s, this is my intraoral camera story, but in the 90s, Patterson was selling the Reveal intraoral camera. It was one of the first ones. It wasn't the,
Remember
but it
it.
was one of the first. It was 15,500 bucks. And they
Yep.
had an event here in Kansas City at a hotel in a ballroom, and they were showing different pieces of tech. And my dad and I were actually on our way to a Royals game, and we were going to drive past the hotel. And my sales guy kind of twisted my arm and got me to promise to go there. So we stopped in, and I looked at the camera. I hadn't been in practice very long. I didn't have 15.5. And I did the quick camera demo, and I went to leave, and I was like heading towards the door, and I looked back over my shoulder because I was like, where's my dad? And my dad is sitting in a chair going, looking at his mouth. And I finally drug him out of there, and we got in the car, and he was like, when are you going to buy that thing? And I was like, Dad, it's 15.5. I don't have 15.5. And he told me, which I thought was funny. He said, "You're thinking like a dentist." And I was like, "Okay, what does that mean?" And he said, "You see big pictures of teeth in textbooks. You see big pictures of teeth when you go to like education events. You see big pictures of teeth in magazines." And I don't remember how old he was, but he was like, "I'm 60 or whatever it was. I've never seen the inside of my own mouth before. If you use that and you educate your patients," which is why I'm bringing this up, the educate thing. He said, "they will understand their problems better and they will want you to fix them." And he loaned me the money for the camera. And that was what really got me started on this whole path. And it's because of education. That's why I brought that up of, it's the same thing with doctors. If they're not educated on what it can do and how much better it is and why it does it, then it's just a gadget, you know? And when you go and, if you've always ridden a bicycle and what do I need a car for? And then you get to test drive a car for a couple of days, you're going to be like, "I'm never getting on a bicycle again as long as I live." And so I really applaud Sean for that. I really do. Cause you're right. A lot of these big companies are like, money, 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 sell, sell, sell more, but we're not doing anything, that doesn't promote sales. And they don't understand that education is what promotes sales.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. We can go all day long on that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you're doing an event. Have you been to Medidenta before?
No,
Okay.
no.
They have got a great facility. You're going to love it.
Good.
Um, they have a whole room they set up for lecture, and it's got air connections, and they've got the hand pieces and all that stuff. So yeah, you'll love it. They've done a really nice job with it. They just did a big remodel, I think, last year because
Yeah, they
they
were sharing a little bit of that. Yeah.
yeah, you're going to love it. It is really, really
Cool.
cool. So I'm
Yeah. I'm
glad
excited.
you're working with them too, because I think you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm excited. Yeah. It's neat. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Oh,
Lori,
very,
thank you. I've taken enough of your time, but I really appreciate you doing this.
no, it's fun. It's been great.
Okay.
And it's fun to know that we're still passionate about what we do and excited about what we do.
Yeah.
And that does, I think that does inspire so many, you know?
Yeah. Well, it dawned on me one day a long time ago that I was like, okay, if I work 4 days a week and I help 10 patients a day, that's 40 people a week. But if I can help 100 doctors help 40 people a week, I just helped 4,000 people a week. It's
Yeah.
just having that impact and knowing that there's people, some distant land that I'll never meet, but I helped them have a better outcome. I mean, that's just so cool. And it's funny too when you talked about stepping away and then coming back. So I don't know if you know this or not, but I sold my practice in 2022 to one of my best friend's daughters, who's just a princess, and I mean that in a good way. But I worked with her for about 8 months. Just all we did was change the name on the building. Everything else was the same hours and everything. And then after about 8 months, I came to her and I was like, "I think maybe I could slow down a little." So I work Mondays and Wednesdays now. And I can tell you now, if I would have stopped when I sold the office to her, I would have gone insane. Um, I would have missed it so much. It's just, it gets in your blood. You love helping people. You love what you do. And I give you credit for getting back into it. I mean, because you were at a point where you could have gone like, "No, I'm going to do something else, whatever." But you have that same thing that some of us have. That's just like, "No, I want to, I
Yeah.
miss
So
that."
I'm gonna tell you this real quick because I don't want to
Yeah,
keep you either. But so I'm gonna go back when you said about multiplying. So every time I go out to speak, I always gather, emails
yeah,
and I take metrics off of the crowd size and
mhm,
I can estimate how many doctors are in there and then about how many of their dentures are doing whatever. Anyhow,
right,
I know confidently have taught enough dentists and offices that I've made a difference in a million dentures.
That
Okay.
that is so
That's pretty
cool.
cool. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
that
That's
is
pretty cool.
amazing.
That's pretty cool. All right. That's a big deal.
Yeah,
That's a big deal.
yeah. The
It's
next,
take a little bit to get there, but yeah.
yeah,
But so anyhow, so I just finished as of May 1. I have you have people that come to you all the time and what are you gonna do with your practice? Where are
yeah,
you at? What's going on? So
yeah.
I made the decision about a year and a half ago that I was going to look for someone. I thought I had actually an associate who was going to take over. Actually, 3 years ago, she came in, had a fellowship with implantology. I mean, she would have been the perfect fit, great restorative dentist, all that. But for reasons it didn't go forward, and she's doing a different path. And love her still, it all works out, but
Right.
things it wasn't meant to be. So I last fall was more compelled to, and I had a conversation with a dentist who he has four other practices, and
Okay.
he has a very like kind mindset of just. I mean, we all know expenses. I mean, where I'm at, it's tough to. If you lose an assistant, you might
Oh,
3 or 4 months
yeah.
of that are hygienist 4 months out of trying to find
Yep.
staffing. Okay, I keep going, right? And I'm getting older. I don't want to, I want to work 3 days a week and I don't want to have all this administrative stuff and
I get
hassle.
that completely.
So
Absolutely.
he and I negotiated in January, and as of May 1, he bought my practice. And
Okay. Congratulations.
yeah, thank you. I'm super thrilled about this. And then I am working now. I will work 3 days a week up till August 1. And August 1, I will drop back to Monday and Tuesdays only. And I cannot wait because I know there's going to be more in the hopper for me and things. I just know that. And
Yeah.
I'm excited to be able to have the other underbelly taken care of, but yet
Yep.
I can flourish. And it's interesting. I just finished, I was on vacation. I went to Alaska last week.
Congratulations. That's cool
Yeah,
too.
it was great. And I love to travel, right? We all do. But I read a really good book about thoughts, about thinking,
Hmm.
and about just having space. And everyone will tell you psychologically and physiologically, when you have space, you're able to be more creative. And you and I are creative.
Yep.
And I look forward to what you're going to do because you're going to have now that space. And
Yep.
I am too. And I get really jazzed about that because I think, oh my gosh, what could you do with that space and that process? And what can you,
Yeah.
and where does your intuition lead you? And it's more about that intuition, not my thoughts, but my intuition. Where's
Right.
your heart? That's your heart driven to. So this comes at a really good time, and I'm excited. I think there's going to be, and it might not be dentistry. That's what's interesting to me. It might be other avenues.
Right.
I can, there's a lot of things that I can pivot, and you can too, and put your brains on. And I don't know. I'm just going to be very open to that and prayerful about that. And yeah, it's cool. It's good.
You know, it's funny you talk about the space that I often think about, like the great artists. Van Gogh's probably a crummy example because he was crazy, but um, they didn't work like, okay, I got to do this from 10 to 12 and then this from 12 to 1:30. And then at 1:30, I'm going to paint Starry Night. You've got to have that. Oh, you lay out in the backyard and look at the sky and you suddenly think, oh my gosh, I could, but you can't do that on a schedule. You can't, be creative right now or whatever it is. You've got to have that room for it to kind of, my grandpa used to call it percolate, but you've got to have the space to let your mind wander and find those things. And I think too many people get wrapped up in the thing of, I need to be busy. If I'm busy, something good will happen. But sometimes, I mean, hard work can pay off, don't get me wrong, but sometimes not being busy is the greatest blessing.
Absolutely. That hamster
Yeah.
wheel really gets you caught up a lot. And
Uh-huh.
I love the idea of having the ability to let my brain flourish and to
Hmm.
just let it go and to learn to daydream again.
Yeah.
And we've been so confined by 10-minute increments for how long? And so get
Yes.
out of that, let that go, and let's see what else comes into the picture. And to me, it's really exciting. So yeah, and my family's really excited. They're telling me you can't start another practice, And then I had a friend. She called me 2 days ago. She goes, "Hey, when are we taking that filler course at Botox? You could start doing that now." And I'm like, "I know I could."
Yeah, it is funny how that kind of stuff happens. I one time I when my kids I've only got one at home now, but all three of my kids were at home. And a company called me like a month before the Greater New York, and they were like, "Hey, we just had somebody. We've got like a 1 hour speaker slot in their thing, that they do." And they're like, "We just had somebody that had something going, and they can't make it. Could you come out and do it?" And I was like, "All right, I'll do it." I basically flew into New York Saturday night, got up, went to the Javits Center, did a 1 hour course, walked out of the Javits Center with my suitcase, got in a cab, went back to the airport, and came home.
I've done
And
it
I
a few
got,
times.
yeah, I mean, and I got home, and later that week, my daughter, my oldest daughter, who I think she was like 13 or 14 at the time, she was like, "Dad, can I talk to you about something?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." And I could tell it was kind of something that was bothering her. And she said, "Can you not do stuff on Thanksgiving anymore?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I can pick and choose what I do, sure." And she says, "That's good because like Thanksgiving Day afternoon, you checked out and you weren't really with us." And I
Yep.
was like, "Well, because I do. I do. I get in go mode like even 2 days before I start thinking
You
about,
you have you have to. You and I
yeah,
understand that. Yeah. Our families understand that. They
uh,
see that. Yeah. They see that for
yeah.
sure.
So having that space and not have anyway, it's interesting that, it's like that that wasn't what I should have done. And sometimes I got to have some people call me on it just to remind me of, what's going on. So
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's great though. It's all good. It's all
it
good.
is all good. It is all good. God works in mysterious ways. So,
For sure.
well, Lori, thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending the time with me and
Yeah,
and
this has
and
been fun.
doing that. Okay,
Yes.
great. Well, I will
Stay
be in
in touch.
touch.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
absolutely.
All right, bye.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.